Howdy folks, and welcome to the Hillbilly Kitchen. Today we're making Philly cheesesteak sloppy joes. Now this is a really easy one-pot meal, and what it's going to do is it's going to give you 4 to 6 sandwiches out of a pound of ground beef instead of 2 or 3. Maybe even more than that. You could probably stretch this to 7 or 8 sandwiches in a pinch if you needed to. But for sloppy joes, you need ground beef, and I have about a pound here, and you need something for a sauce, and we're going to be making a brown gravy. And I'm going to talk about this as I start the video because there's a lot of things you can use for that. And for Philly cheesesteak, you need peppers and onions. Any peppers and onions will work, or any bell pepper, any color. I know a lot of times with children you have trouble getting them to eat green, so you can use yellow, red, whatever, and they'll eat it and they won't say anything about it because they don't see that green pepper. So, you know, do whatever color you like or whatever color you can get everybody to eat. Philly cheesesteak usually has provolone cheese on it, but you can use any cheese. And if you have a bun, I highly recommend buttering it and toasting it. It makes the sandwich. But you can serve this just on bread. And when I was a kid, we always had it on bread. We had everything on bread. We rarely ever got buns. But we're going to start by browning our ground beef. And we want to bust that up. The bigger the crowd you got to feed, the smaller the chunks of ground beef you want, because that will spread it out through the sloppy joe better and more even. And in sloppy joes, generally you don't want great big chunks of meat anyway. You want it kind of crumbled up fine. All right, and I'm going to go ahead and add my peppers and my onions. Now I chopped up a whole pepper and a whole onion. For a pound, you could cut it down to a half if you wanted to, but this is kind of the vegetables in this dish. You can have just the sloppy joes and nothing else with them. You can serve them with chips. You can serve them with some fresh vegetables, some cucumbers and tomatoes, or carrot sticks, or whatever, or some fresh fruit. But I'm going to go ahead and dump that in with my ground beef and get that cooking. And how you chop up these peppers and onions too, it just kind of depends on your taste. You can leave them in great big chunks, or you can dice them, or you can slice them. I slice mine kind of thin because I want them mixed all through my sloppy joe. Okay, once you get your peppers and your onions and your ground beef in the pan, you want to salt and pepper it to taste. Keep in mind that you're salting the ground beef and the peppers and the onions. And you can add other spices in here if you want to. What I recommend doing though is serving this with some condiments. Sit out some different kinds of mustard, maybe some hot sauce, some ketchup, especially if you're doing french fries or tater tots or something with it, which this is a good french fry or tater tot meal. And just serve it with condiments rather than making the whole pan really hot, because you're probably going to be making this for a crowd and not everybody likes it really hot. Also keep in mind, if you've got folks on a low salt diet, you can add most of your salt on the table, or even wait until the end and add it, and you don't have to add as much. Now you can cook this on like a medium high, because part of the purpose of sloppy joes is to get dinner quick. The other part is to feed a whole bunch of people with a pound of ground beef instead of just a couple people, because you're busting that ground beef up, you're adding in the peppers and the onions, and we're going to add in some kind of a sauce, which like I said, we're doing about brown gravy. It will make that go a whole lot farther. That pound of ground beef will make a lot more sandwiches, so go ahead and turn it up and get it done. You know, like I said, medium high. Just keep an eye on it. You're going to have to stir it pretty often if you're cooking it fast. If you're doing other things and you don't have time to watch it, turn it down on medium low and let it sit there and cook longer. So, you know, there's not like a right temperature to cook this at. It depends on how much time you've got to get dinner on the table. And you can have this on the table in 15 minutes probably. if you're doing some kind of frozen potato, frozen French fry or something, you can definitely have this completely prepped, your vegetables cut and everything, while those are cooking. While that finishes up, let's talk about gravy options here a little bit. I'm using some cornstarch to thicken mine with today. You want 1 tablespoon of cornstarch per cup of liquid. You can also use flour to thicken it with. If you use flour, you want 2 tablespoons of flour per cup of liquid. And if you're using flour, when your meat and your vegetables are done, when your meat's brown and your vegetables are tender, you want to add your flour directly into the pan. Don't put it in your liquid, because if you put it in your liquid, you're going to taste the flour in your sloppy joes. You want to put it in your pan with your meat and your onions after they're cooked and let it brown a little bit. I'm going to link my sausage gravy video in the end of this. So if you don't know how to make gravy with flour, you can click on that and I explain it in detail. But because I'm using cornstarch, I'm going to add my cornstarch to my water. You can use beef broth if you want to in this, or you can just use the plain water. Now, it will not have as much flavor in the final sloppy joe if you don't have some kind of beef flavoring to go in your liquid. I'm going to use some bouillon in my liquid because I don't happen to have beef broth on hand. If you do, you can use beef broth. But our grannies and our moms always kept bouillon in the cabinet for stuff like this, because it's less expensive, it stores easier, and you can make a meal out of it, or you can make something basic into a meal in just a minute if you've got some bouillon. So you don't need to keep cans and cans of stock on hand, or cans and cans of the instant gravy, or canned jarred gravy. A lot of people use that. That stuff is so expensive. You can still get bouillon cubes for $1 or $1.50, and there's a lot of meals in there, a lot of gravy. The Better Than bouillon, I really like it. I actually was given some Better Than bouillon as a gift the first time I used it, and it really is better than bouillon. It's it just has more flavor. But you know, it's up, and it's way cheaper than the stock too, but it's up to you what you use. You can use just the plain water if that's all you have. And you know, depending on your budget, the plain water will work. But I'm going to add some Better Than bouillon here to my water and my cornstarch. And you can also put this directly in your pan. I'm probably going to adjust the grease in mine a little bit though before I add this, so I'm going to go ahead and put it in my water and kind of mix that up. And I'm going to mix this up right before I dump it in my pan too. If you're uneasy about making gravy, which it's so simple, I don't know why anybody would be, but I know some folks are, you can use the jarred gravy in this recipe. I know my mother-in-law used to make brown gravy sloppy joes all the time. She didn't put the peppers and the onions in them, I don't think, but she always used the canned gravy in hers. So that's kind of up to you, whatever you want to do. Okay, my meat is pretty well done. My vegetables look like they're done. They're kind of starting to change colors, which means they're getting tender. And again, you can cook these as long as you want to. If you like your vegetables more well done, cook it a little longer. If you like them crunchier, cut them in bigger pieces and they'll stay crunchier because it'll take them longer to cook. Now, I'm going to check my fat content here and see if I want to get some of the fat out of it. And I think I do want to get just a little bit out. And a good way to adjust the fat without taking it all out and also without spilling your dinner is just a few paper towels. I mean, I cannot tell you how many times I spilled the ground beef when I was making sloppy joes or spaghetti or something. Well, actually, it wasn't too many times. I learned. You only have to do that a few times when you're on a tight budget and you're raising kids to not do it again. All right. That's pretty good. Got a little of it out of there. Now, adjusting the fat does a few things. It reduces the calories, but it also reduces the calories. So if you've got to feed a whole bunch of people, you might want to leave that fat in there, because fat is the part of food that makes us feel full. Fat also has a lot of flavor in it. So if you're just using water for your gravy, you might want to leave it in there. Now your mamas and your grannies, they always added gravy when they fried meat. And they did it for a few reasons. Number one, it makes the meal go farther. Number two, it cleans your pan out. All that stuff that's stuck in the bottom of the pan, the gravy's going to boil it out. So you're not going to have to spend so much time cleaning your pan. And number three, it just about eliminates all of the waste when you have a meal, because anything that's stuck in the pan ends up back in the meal. Now once you add your water with your cornstarch and your bouillon or your beef broth or whatever you're using in there, you do want to stir it. And I'm going to go ahead and cut my heat off here, because I got plenty of heat in the pan to finish this up. And just instant like that, that cornstarch and water turns into a thick, creamy gravy. And the bouillon, or better than bouillon, made it nice and brown. So it not only is going to taste great, it looks good. Now, if you are using water, you might want to do the flour method, because when you brown that flour, the flour will make your gravy nice and brown. So you'll still have the brown color. You'll get a little more flavor from the brown flour if you don't have any bouillon to put in it, and it will make the gravy richer. But that is all there is to it. And literally in 30 minutes, you can have this on the table, or less than 30 minutes probably. And you don't really have to worry about serving a whole lot else with it, because you do have the pepper and the onion in there. And you can see this is going to make way more than 3 or 4 sandwiches, which is the most you would get out of a pound of ground beef if you were making hamburgers. Now, I do recommend letting it sit for just a minute before you put it on your sandwiches, because what that's going to do is thicken up the gravy just a little bit. You don't want it too thick, because then it won't soak into your bread, and that's what makes a sloppy joe good. Also, if you toast your bread or your buns, that's going to keep it from getting too soggy. So hang on to this one. This is one that'll stretch your budget, and I know we all need that now, and I got a feeling as time goes on, we're going to need it even more and more. But these are absolutely delicious. Set out some cheese and some condiments, like I said, mustards, ketchup, hot sauce, whatever your family likes on stuff like this, and let them enjoy it. Before we go, I want to share Philippians 4:8 with you. Finally, brethren, whatsoever things are true, whatsoever things are honest, whatsoever things are just, whatsoever things are pure, whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever things are of good report, if there be any virtue, if there be any praise, think on these things. Now, this is a message I think that as Christians we quite often miss, especially when we are in a time of trouble. We need to focus on the things that God has done for us in those times of trouble, rather than focusing on the trouble. And the things that God has done for us, that's the evidence of God in our lives. And that is the only proof there is in this world to the non-believer. The evidence of God in your life is the only proof of God's existence to a non-believer. So when we go into a time of trouble, if we focus on our trouble and not on the things that are true and honest and just and pure and lovely and of good report, then we get discouraged, and God, the evidence of God in us disappears. So we have to focus on those things. We have to share those things. Because when we share those things, the unbeliever sees God. In this video, or in the comments on this video, I want to ask that you share those things in the comments for each other, to encourage each other, because we are in a time of trouble worldwide, and many of us are going through our own personal troubles. But when we share those things with each other, it encourages our brothers and our sisters, and it lets the unbeliever see the proof of the Lord in us. See the evidence that God is real, because that is the only evidence, your life and mine. So share those things in the comments. And I want to share with you something that we have all been praying about, or many of us have been praying about. Our sister Kirsten, who is going through cancer treatments, was living on what the medical profession calls borrowed time, what Christians call the Lord's time. She is responding very well to her treatments. Her tumors are reduced by about 40% on her liver. So please continue to pray for her. And your support of her, your prayers and your comments and your messages, and all that you have done to show her love, I honestly think that is doing far more than the medicine is doing. So continue to pray for her and lift her up. But there is a lot of good news there, and God is definitely working in that. I want to thank you all so much for joining us again in the Hillbilly Kitchen. If you haven't already, please don't forget to click like and subscribe before you leave. And until next time, remember to put God first.